Hello everyone, welcome to your next class. In this one we're going to talk about list and dictionary comprehensions. These are ways to make lists and dictionaries using for loops really tight and efficient and compressed and compact. As coders, we absolutely love to make our code as compact and easy to read as possible. So efficiency and getting things down to one line as opposed to four are things that we really like because it reduces the load on us to understand and read lots of different lines of code all the time. So I'm hoping that learning this stuff will make you a better coder. It'll make you more efficient and quick at doing certain tasks. There's a lot of nifty tricks that you can do with these kind of things. So let's just jump into it. So today you're going to learn how to do a list comprehension, which I'm talking about basically a one-line for loop. We're going to use if and else conditionals for that list comprehension. So we're going to embed if and if-else statement into a one-line for loop and have it generate a list. And we're also going to do this with dictionaries as well. And I'm going to show you a couple of tricks in order to make this run really nifty and cool. So, what is a list or dictionary comprehension? Really simply, it's a way to generate, augment, or develop a list or a dictionary with some logic in one line really quickly and simply. Oftentimes, when we're building lists and for loops, we only need 3 or 4 lines of code if we were doing it in the really traditional way like I showed you in previous classes. However, list comprehension is a good way to bring that down into one line and do it really quickly. So it's a useful technique. So with that, guys, we're going to move into the syntax of how to build a list comprehension, and then we're going to run the code and see how it works. Okay, so here we have our syntax example. The first thing I'm doing is importing NumPy, which is a numbers package that has a bunch of different classes, features, and functions that allow you to do math-based problems a lot easier. This first line is all I'm doing is I wanted to create a list with 20 random numbers, and the default, all this is doing is calling a function a class called random, and then a function called just .rand. And what rand does, if you just put in one number, is it creates 20 numbers randomly between 0 and 1. They're floats. So it'll be 0.53, 0.26, and so on and so forth, okay? And that is just creating a list, and we're storing that list. We're assigning it to this variable called data. Then I'm printing how many elements are in that list and what that list looks like here, okay? Underneath is our list comprehension. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking that list and I'm doing something interesting with it. I'm going from here. So first off, you'll realize that I have everything wrapped in square brackets, which is wrapped in a list, and I have a for loop right here. And the interesting thing is there is no colon in this list comprehension. So there's no colon required for it. This might be the only time you'll ever see a for loop and if statements without colons embedded in them because it's in a list comprehension and that syntax would mess up and confuse Python. So we put the for loop in front of our if-else statement, and we have if here. This first if statement responds with this. So we put what we want it to do, print x, do an operation on x, like subtract some value, 0.1 maybe. Right now I'm just saying leave x as it is. But we also have our else statement, and rather than it being in front of our condition, it's behind it. So it's a little bit different in terms of, it's not necessarily internally consistent, but you notice here that we put x back into the list. We run this if statement if x is bigger than 0.5, so if every element of this list for x and data, if an element is greater than 5.5, we just leave it in there. Otherwise, we replace it with a string, which is just the string says less. Okay, so if we have any numbers that are less than 0.5 here, they're going to be replaced with a string, and then we can see how long this list is and how what that list ends up looking like, that data list. One thing that you cannot do with a list comprehension is have it just like delete that. You can't do like an else statement with continue or pass. It won't work. You have to build logic that will have it just either skip information. So like if it's not greater than 0.5, you can just like leave this out, and then it'll have, you know, only things that are 0.5. So you can't use if, pass, or continue with your else statements in a list comprehension. That's really important. The last thing you see here is a dictionary comprehension. So the only thing I'm doing here is I'm not showing if and else. I'm just showing you the four. First off, it's wrapped in curly braces. And I'm showing you the four syntax here, and we have enumerate here, which what that does is, and when you use the function enumerate on a list, it gives you a list of tuples. The first so kind of looks like this. So one element will be 0, and then 0.5, and then the next element will be 1, and this will be like 0.56, and so on. Okay, so it creates a list of tuples where the first element is the index position and the second element is the value. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm labeling what the index position is and what the value is for each element in this list of tuples. And what I'm doing is I'm setting the index to be the key and the value to be the value for this dictionary. So I can create a dictionary with a for loop in one line, and I'll show you what that looks like here. Okay, everyone, here we are. So first we import our NumPy, and we label it as MP, and this function here is going to generate 20 numbers between 0 and 1. We are going into our NumPy package, into the random class, and pulling out this random function where you can just pass in one variable to give you default between 0 and 1, but you can change those parameters if you'd like. For now, we are just going to print how long this list is and show what the data looks like, which is below. So here we are, it's 20 items long, and they're all between 0 and 1, as you see here. So the first thing I'm going to show you is our if and else conditional with list comprehensions. So the first thing we get here is I regenerated these random numbers, but now you can see that when I recreate this with an if-else statement, any numbers that were less than 0.5, which is the first one is here at 0.22, just before it was 0.51, you'll see that it was replaced with a string that's less. Now, one thing that you cannot do with list comprehensions is do something like this: continue or pass. Look, it's not going to work. And that's just because of the logic of how these kind of things work. If you didn't want to add a value, you don't need to have an else statement in your list comprehension. That's already inefficient. All you'd have to do is just an if statement, right? You just say if it's 0.5, then do one thing. However, so that way, like, you don't need to be doing an else statement and something like that. However, you're going to notice that here, that this doesn't work either. And that's because of a little quirk of list comprehensions, where if you just have an if statement in Python 3, it needs to be, you put it after the for statement. So with an if and else, if you have an else, your if-else statement goes in before your for statement or your for loop. However, if you have just an if statement, you put it after your for loop or your for syntax. See what happens here. This ends up working, right? What was it missing here? Oh, that's why it wasn't working, guys. Silly me. We replaced this data. Okay, so why this wasn't working, let's go through this. This is an interesting bug, because now, even though I have this greater than 0.5 statement here, it failed because it couldn't. It found one of these less than strings. So what we need to do is replace that, and then this will run just fine. See how that worked? And now we only have 7 items because there are 13 items in here that were less than 0.5, and that ended up just removing them from the list. You're literally creating a new list here. That's why it's all wrapped in square braces, okay guys? That's kind of how you should be thinking about what a list comprehension is doing and why the syntax looks this way. Okay. Lastly, I'm going to show you dictionary comprehensions, a very quick example. Okay. So you'll see here, I did a for loop, and it just has 2 variables, and I did something called enumerate. Remember what enumerate does is it creates a list of tuples, and the first element of that tuple is the index position from 0 onward, and the second element is the value. And so all I did was I created a dictionary comprehension. Look, I have these curly braces here, and then I set the key to the index position and the value to the value variable here. So when I print this, you'll see here that this dictionary has indexes from 0 to 19, 20, 0 to 20 here, because I just created the random 20 numbers and printed it here. So you have your index position 0, first value, 1, second value, and that's how I created a dictionary using one line and a list with a for loop. Okay, so that's gonna be it for this class, guys. I'm gonna move on to the recap. Okay, so what did we learn, guys? We learned how to do list comprehensions. We learned a little bit about how to use if and else statements within those comprehensions, so we can create nice, packed, efficient lists from for loops using one line of code as opposed to multiple lines, which makes it nice and easy to read, and like you'll be a more efficient, quick coder if you can do stuff like this. So thank you very much, guys, and see you next time.